Hello, welcome back to the reading of the poem of the Man-God, written by Maria Valtorta, Volume 1. Chapter 41, Part 1, The Dispute of Jesus with the Doctors in the Temple. 28th January 1944. I see Jesus. He is an adolescent. He is dressed in a tunic which I think is made of white linen, and it reaches down to his feet. Over it, he is wearing a pale red rectangular piece of cloth. He is bareheaded. His long hair reaches down to half his ears, and it is somewhat darker in hue than when I saw him as a child. He is a strong boy, and very tall for his age, which is still relatively young, as is obvious from his countenance. He looks at me smiling, and stretches his hands towards me. But his smile is already like the one I see in him when he is a man, mild but rather serious. He is by himself. I do not see anything else for the time being. He is leaning against a low wall on a minor road, which is all uphill and downhill, littered with stones, and has a ditch in the middle, which in bad weather must turn into a rivulet. But at present it is dry, because the day is lovely. I also seem to be going near the low wall, and I look around and down as Jesus is doing. I see a group of houses, irregular in formation. Some of the houses are tall, others are low, and they are scattered in all directions. They look like a handful of little white stones thrown down on dark soil. The comparison is a poor but good one. The streets and the lanes are like veins in all that whiteness. Here and there I see some plants protruding from the walls. Many are in bloom, while others are already covered with new leaves. It must be springtime. On my left, there is the massive structure of the temple, on 3 sets of terraces covered with buildings and towers and yards and porches. In the center, the highest, most solemn and rich building rises with its round domes, which shine in the sun as if they were covered with copper or gold. It is all enclosed by an embattled wall, the merlons of which are like those of a stronghold. A tower higher than the others, built over a rather narrow climbing road, commands a clear view of the huge building. It looks like a stern sentry. Jesus stares at the place. He then turns round, leans back once again against the wall, as he had done before, and looks at a hillock which is in front of the building. A hillock crowded with houses at its base, while the rest of it is bare. I see that a street ends over there in an arch, beyond which there is nothing but a road paved with square stones, which are loose and uneven. They are not too large, not like the stones of the Roman consular roads. They rather resemble the classic stones of the old pavements in Viareggio. I do not know whether there are any still left. But they are not joined together, a really rough road. Jesus' face becomes so serious that I look at the hillock, endeavoring to find the cause of his sadness. But I do not see anything special. It is a bare hillock and nothing else. Instead, I lose Jesus because when I turn round, he is no longer there, and I fall asleep with that vision. When I awake with its memory in my heart, after I have recovered some of my strength, and my mind is at peace, because they are all asleep, I find myself in a place which I have never seen before. There are yards and fountains and porches and houses, or rather pavilions, because they look more like pavilions than houses. There is a large crowd of people dressed in the ancient style of the Jews, and there is a lot of bawling. When I look round, I realize I am inside the large building which Jesus was looking at, because I see the embattled wall surrounding it, the tower watching over it, and the imposing building that rises in the center, and round which there are beautiful and large porches, where many people are intent on activities. I understand that I am in the enclosure of the temple in Jerusalem. I see Pharisees in long flowing dresses, priests dressed in linen and wearing precious plates at the top of their chests and on their foreheads, and with other sparkling points here and there on their varied robes. which are very wide and white, tied to their waists by precious belts. There are also others with fewer decorations, but they must still belong to the sacerdotal caste and are surrounded by younger disciples. I realize that they are the doctors of the law. Among all these people I am lost, because I do not know why or what I am doing there. I go near a group of doctors where they have just started a theological dispute. Many people do the same. Amongst the doctors, there is a group headed by one whose name is Gamaliel, and by another old and almost blind man who is supporting Gamaliel in the dispute. This man, whose name I hear is Hillel, I am writing it with an H because I hear an aspiration at the beginning of the name, seems to be a teacher or relative of Gamaliel, because the latter treats him with familiarity and respect at the same time. Gamaliel's group is more broad-minded, whereas another group, and it is more numerous, is led by one whose name in Shammai, and is noticeable for its conservative, resentful intolerance, which the gospel has clarified so well. Gamaliel, surrounded by a compact group of disciples, is speaking of the coming of the Messiah, and founding his observations on Daniel's prophecy. He states that the Messiah must have already been born, because the 70 prophesied weeks from the time the decree of the reconstruction of the temple was issued expired some 10 years before. Shammai opposes him, stating that if it is true that the temple has been rebuilt, it is also true that the slavery of Israel has increased, and the peace which he whom the prophets called Prince of Peace was to bring is quite far from being in the world, and in particular is far from Jerusalem. The town is in fact oppressed by an enemy who is so bold as to exert his dominations inside the enclosure of the temple, dominated by the Antonia Tower, full of Roman legionaries, ready to put down with their swords any riot which may break out for the independence of the country. The dispute, full of captious objections, is dragged on endlessly. All the doctors show off their learning, not so much to beat their opponents as to display themselves to the admiration of the listeners. Their aims are quite obvious. From the close group of the believers, the clear voice of a boy is heard. Gamaliel is right. There is a stir in the crowd and in the group of doctors. They look for the interrupter, but it is not necessary to search for him, because he does not hide. He makes his way through the crowd and goes near the group of the rabbis. I recognize my Jesus adolescent. He is sure of himself and open-hearted. His eyes are sparkling with intelligence. Who are you? They ask him. I am a son of Israel, who has come to fulfill what the law prescribes. His bold and frank reply is appreciated, and it gains him smiles of approval and favor. They take an interest in the young Israelite. What is your name? Jesus of Nazareth. The feeling of benevolence fades away in Shammai's group, but Gamaliel, more benignly, continues his conversation with Hillel. It is indeed Gamaliel who, with respect, suggests to the old man, ask the boy something. On what do you base your certainty? Asks Hillel. I will now put the names in front of the replies for the sake of brevity and clarity. Jesus says, on the prophecy which cannot be wrong about the time and the signs which took place at the time it came true. It is true that Caesar dominates us, but the world and Palestine were in such peace when the 70 weeks expired that it was possible for Caesar to order the census in his dominions. Had there been wars in the empire and riots in Palestine, he would not have been able to do so. As that time was completed, so the other period of 62 weeks plus one from the completion of the temple is also being completed, so that the Messiah may be anointed and the remainder of the prophecy may come true for the people who did not want him. Can you doubt that? Do you not remember the star that was seen by the wise men from the east and stopped over the sky in Bethlehem of Judah, and that the prophecies and the visions from Jacob onwards indicate that place as the one destined as the birthplace of the Messiah, son of Jacob's son, through David, who was born from Bethlehem? Do you not remember Balaam? A star will be born of Jacob. The wise men from the east, whose purity and faith opened their eyes and ears, saw the star, and understood its name, Messiah, and they came to worship the light which had descended into the world. This has been a reading from the poem of the Man-God, written by Maria Valtorta, Volume 1, Chapter 41, Part 1, The Dispute of Jesus with the Doctors in the Temple. Thank you for listening. I will see you tomorrow. May God bless you, and may peace be with you.